Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friday Apocryphal Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything Friday Apocryphal and podcast. And boy, do we have a show for you today. Today, we are covering 2nd Maccabees chapters 13 through 15.
And we're finishing 2nd Maccabees.
Yeah, the end of 2nd Maccabees. So far, I'm thinking that this one's actually better than 1st Maccabees.
Well, there's all sorts of cool shit in this one. There's
like
angels with gilded armor.
And all these visions.
Yeah.
With horsemen.
And the horsemen, all of the, when they blind the enemies in battle with their holy light, right? That's some magic shit. You don't get that in the Bible.
Yeah, yes you do.
Well, you don't get it as often.
I suppose.
I mean, 2nd Maccabees, over the course of, 12 chapters so far, we've had, 3 different angelic being encounters?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, a couple of those were in battle, too.
Yeah.
Which you don't often see in the Bible. If you were to see it in the Bible, maybe you'd see, one angelic encounter in battle. And a few books later, you might have someone get visited by a messenger, but it's not going to be a messenger described as being in gilded armor, right?
Right.
It's not going to be 3 guys who whip someone to death.
You're right. It's not going to be 3 guys who whip someone to death. Either way, I am very excited to finish 2nd Maccabees because we covered this stuff in 1st Maccabees, albeit differently.
Yeah. It's kind of like Chronicles, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
You just wait till 3rd and 4th Maccabees.
Are they the same?
Well, I mean, they're not the same. They have,
they're
plenty of differences.
They're a little different.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's like all the Pokemon versions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same game.
Yeah, but just a little bit different.
A little bit different.
A little bit.
Yeah.
It's like Gen 1, right? Because in Japan, they had green version. In the U.S., they had blue. So there's 4 of them.
And there's yellow and red, obviously. So, yeah. That's enough.
Anyways.
4 Maccabees, 4 versions.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But you can't trade between versions.
That's so sad.
Okay, so I have the Anchor Bible version of 2nd Maccabees, a new translation with introduction and commentary by Jonathan A. Goldstein.
We also have Erdman's commentary on the Bible. We have the 2nd Maccabees commentary from the Hermenia series by Robert Doran, who also wrote the commentary on 1st and 2nd Maccabees in the New Interpreter's Bible commentary.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's all right here. All these wonderful, wonderful books.
It's all together.
Yes.
Well, why don't I get into it then? Chapter 13, The Expedition of Antiochus V and Lyceus. Anything you want to say right off the bat?
Just once you get to the end of verse 2.
Okay. In the year 149, Judas and his men received the news that Antiochus Eupator had come in force against Judea, along with Lyceus, his guardian and chief minister. He had a Greek army recruited abroad, consisting of 110,000 infantry, 5,300 cavalry, 22 elephants, and 300 scythed chariots. That's the end of verse 2.
Okay, so first we can talk about the date here. This is one of the few times in 2nd Maccabees where we get an actual date, because other times it was after 3 years or after some time. It was all very vague dating.
Yeah.
But here we get a discrete date. So the account in 2nd Maccabees parallels, the account in 2nd Maccabees 13 parallels the one in 1st Maccabees 6:28 through 63, which dates the invasion to the 150th year of the Seleucid Babylonian calendar, or 162 BCE. 2nd Maccabees, however, which seems to use the Seleucid Macedonian calendar, places this invasion in 149, or between 164 and October 163 BCE. Some scholars prefer the dating in 2nd Maccabees, while others follow 1st Maccabees, and propose that since the letters in chapter 11 all carry the date of 148 Seleucid era, either Jason or the epitomist placed the second expedition a year later.
Mm.
And
Yes.
then,
I was going to say something real quick.
Go ahead.
The numbers for all those troops felt very exaggerated again.
oh yeah, definitely.
And so if we do just an easy conversion where we drop a 0, 11,000 guys, that sounds pretty reasonable.
Well, also,
And 2.1 elephants. That makes sense. Just drop a 0.
well, I mean, mainly it's strange that they have such difference between these numbers, right?
Yeah, they're not the same from first Maccabees,
You
are
go
they?
well. It goes from 110,000 infantry, 5,300 cavalry. All right, that's a reasonable difference in numbers, right?
Yeah.
22 elephants. Like, you jumped from tens of thousands, right, to 22 elephants, and then 300 scythe chariots, right? It's not even like a round number.
Yeah, and there's not really much commentary on the actual numbers here.
Like, I'm trying to find it in Goldstein's commentary, and Goldstein, like, he's so long-winded.
Well, yeah, he really is.
Yeah, that it's almost impossible to find. But there is a little bit in here. Basically, this is an expeditionary force, right?
Sure.
It seems a bit big for an expeditionary force, but okay. Menelaus, too, came before them for an audience, and thoroughly concealing his real motives, egged Antiochus on. His thought was not for the preservation of the country, but for his own appointment to office. However, the King of Kings roused Antiochus's anger against the wretch.
Yeah, so King of Kings, obviously that's an epithet that's used for, I think it was used for Cyrus. I think it was also used for God in First Enoch, but let's, I think I have a note on that. I might be wrong about the Cyrus one. So, yeah, the author stresses that God rules all events, and so uses the epithet King of Kings for God.
Yeah, check Enoch 9:4, Deuteronomy 10:17, Psalm 136:3.
Oh, yeah, and it was an epithet used of Persian kings in Ezra and Daniel, and of Nebuchadnezzar in Ezekiel. Yeah.
All right. When Lyceus argued to show that Menelaus was to blame for all the troubles, the king ordered that he be taken to Beroia and executed in the manner customary there. I wonder what the manner customary there.
So what verse was that?
That was verse 4, the end of verse 4. I'm looking back here to see. Beroia is Aleppo. What's Aleppo?
No, yeah, the place is Aleppo, yeah.
Yeah, it's Aleppo. It doesn't say anything in here about the customary manner of execution.
Well, okay, yeah, it is. I do have a bit on that, so to continue reading until the end of verse 8.
All right. Indeed, in Beroia there is a tower 50 cubits high, full of ashes, with a rotating device descending steeply from every direction into the ashes. There the community joins in pushing to doom men guilty of temple robbery and perpetrators of other exceedingly heinous crimes. Such was the death which befell the wicked Menelaus. He did not even reach the ground. His fate was altogether just. He who had perpetrated many sins regarding the altar, the fire and ashes of which are holy, met his death in ashes. So he wasn't burned. He was drowned
Pretty
in
much.
ashes.
Yeah. So the note here is death by ashes was a Persian punishment. If the ashes were cold, the criminal would suffocate. If they were hot, he would burn to death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, do they just have a pile of ash that's sometimes on fire or not?
No, they're describing this as like a tower. It's like a silo, right? Like a grain silo.
But you just put burnt ash in it.
Yeah, there's burnt ash inside of the silo, and they just push people down. And they said that there was a thing moving at the center. It says, with a rotating device descending steeply from every direction into the ashes.
It's something to make the ashes move around.
Yeah, so
It's a vortex of death.
it's a vortex of
ash.
death. You get sucked down into the ashes like quicksand or like a whirlpool even, and then you suffocate. That's pretty hardcore.
I mean, hey, when you're a Persian king, you get to spend your time thinking of stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess.
You know, those last execution methods weren't very efficient and kind of boring. Can we mix things up? And I mean a lot. And fast.
Yes.
Mix them up fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. The king's thoughts had roused him to barbarous fury as he came intending to show the Jews far worse treatment than they had received under his father. Contrary to those letters, right?
Yeah, exactly. Contrary to the letters.
Yep. On receiving this news, Judas ordered issues to the people to pray to the Lord day and night that he come to their aid now, if ever. For they were on the point of losing their Torah and country and holy temple, and that he not let his people, who had just begun to revive, fall into the hands of blasphemous Gentiles. All joined in doing so. For 3 days, weeping and fasting and prostrating themselves, they all unceasingly beseeched the merciful Lord, and then Judas, after urging them to take heart, ordered them to stand by. So they essentially pray for 3 days.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, as was pretty common in this entire book. I mean,
Yeah.
before every battle, they pray. Yeah.
But this is everyone, right?
Sure.
This isn't just an army. In a closed meeting with the elders, he recommended marching out and deciding the issue with the help of God before the king's army invaded Judea and seized control of the city.
So the elders with whom Judas consults, verse 13, are either members of a council or senate or some consultative body. According to the temple scroll from Qumran, the king should always have with him 12 princes of his people, 12 priests and 12 Levites, without whom he should make no decision. Before going to war, he should have the high priest consult the Urim and Thummim, which is something we have discussed quite a bit.
Right.
Is that worth reading?
Not really, at least not yet.
Okay.
But the Urim and Thummim, those things, they're using them for divination.
Yeah.
Having entrusted the outcome to the creator of the universe, Judas exhorted his men to fight nobly to the death for laws, temple, city, country, and national institutions. He pitched his camp near Modane. After giving his men God's victory as the password, he picked the best of his young men and made a night attack on the king's quarters and killed 2,000 of the men in the camp and stabbed the lead elephant to death along with the man in its howdah. I'm assuming that's like a thing that elephants wear.
What verse?
A howdah. It's at the end of verse 15.
It's
like a saddle, right?
It's a big, basket.
Oh, okay. So he attacked by night the royal residence and killed about 2,000 soldiers and put out of action the best of the elephants with its controller. And then the note on that says, it's the reading of Hanhart. He put together / constructed. Yeah, that's the right one. Okay, that's weird. Makes no sense. I have followed Grimm's emendation. The verb was already used in 1223. As Goldstein notes, the emendation is supported by, he cites a Latin manuscript, all of which have slew. Okay, so there's not an actual note on the controller, on the word there.
What was the word you said again? I've heard it before, but it's definitely Sanskrit or like, it's weird. Could you just say that word one more time? It starts with an H.
Howdah.
Howdah. Yeah. How's that spelled? Tell the audience.
Howdah.
If anyone else could find out what that is, I think it's a basket that goes on top of a war elephant for people to perch on.
Yeah, it's got to be some kind of a saddle or something that is on top of the elephant.
I don't know. Just someone Google it.
Finally, they filled the camp with terror and confusion and withdrew victorious. Day was already dawning as he completed this feat through having the protecting help of the Lord. So, that's not a bad game plan, actually. I mean, attacking by night happens in real world battles all the time.
Yeah,
right?
and then they used guerrilla tactics. They
Yeah.
just ambushed and retreated.
But like when the United States bombs some village in the Middle East, right? Usually it's not in the middle of the day, right?
No, not at all.
Anyway, the king, having tasted the boldness of the Jews, tried to invade their territory by devious routes. He repeatedly attacked Beth Zor, a strong fortress of the Jews, but again and again was repulsed, defeated, humiliated. Judas kept sending into the defenders the necessary supplies. However, Rhodocos, a soldier in the Jewish ranks, divulged their secrets to the enemy. He was tracked down and arrested and executed.
What's the name there?
Rodokos. Rhodocos.
Okay, what's the verse?
The verse is 21.
Okay, I'll check it.
Okay. The king came off second best with the defenders of Beth Zor, gave them the handclasp of peace, received the same from them, marched off.
So Goldstein argued that Rhodocos was an Iranian name. Bar Kokhba recognizes that the name itself is no indicator of whether Rhodocos was a volunteer from the diaspora or a Judean. That's all the commentary you're going to get on the name.
All right. He attacked Judas and his men, was worsted, received the news that Philip, who had been left in charge of the government at Antioch, had rebelled.
Yeah. So since Second Maccabees has reported that this Philip fled to Egypt following the death of Antiochus the Fourth, that was back in 922. It's a different Philip.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Those Phillips.
Yeah, in the condensed statement of Second Maccabees 13:23, one might suppose that someone else named Philip had been left in charge of affairs in Antioch by Antiochus V and was now leading a revolt.
You want to know something that's really obnoxious about the English language?
Absolutely.
Is it worsted? I
Yeah.
haven't heard that phrase before. And
The
I thought
term
it was funny.
worsted
Worsted.
is synonymous with the term bested.
I thought it would be. Yeah, you're right.
That's
it
dumb.
is.
Yeah, it is
It is
dumb,
dumb.
isn't it?
Wow.
Right?
Well, now you
Because
know.
you could say he attacked Judas and his men, was worsted, or you could say he attacked Judas and his men, was bested. Right? It's the same meaning. What an obnoxious word.
Yeah, the English language sucks.
Yeah.
What is that word, Kavi?
Oh, yeah. However, somebody said it to her once.
Ouch.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Perturbed, Antiochus made overtures to the Jews, yielded, and swore to grant them all their rights, made peace, and brought a sacrifice. He showed honor to the temple and conceded privileges to the place. How is he going to be making sacrifices at the temple when he's not a Jew? Lawrence, Is there an exception now for kings?
No,
There wasn't before.
No, they have those 12 Aaronids that follow him around and 12 priests.
Right? Because we had before we remarked on another passage, I think it was in 2nd Maccabees, where they send someone to look on the storages within the temple, and because they're a foreigner who's not a Jew, they're not allowed to enter the temple. So how is Antiochus entering the temple and offering sacrifices as a non-Jew?
What verse is that?
That is in verse 23. It's a long verse, but it's like the last sentence of the verse.
Okay.
It says, he showed honor to the temple and conceded privileges to the place. Right before it says that he swore to grant them all their rights, made peace, and brought a sacrifice. Then it says he showed honor to the temple.
So it is hard to see exactly what is so important, a difference between submitted and affirmed by oath and came to a settlement and brought a sacrifice, that the author insists on narrating both, particularly after the breathless run-through of events. The author, I'm just checking some of the sacrifice stuff here.
Right, because it would make sense. It says that he offered a sacrifice and that he honored the temple. So one would think that means he makes a sacrifice at the temple.
So the verb salon came to a settlement, and its substantive are frequently found in peace settlements and are connected with the forming of the word agreements, a term found in 1325. Here, the settlement is sealed with a sacrifice. Such a thing often happened. In the epic tradition, when Agamemnon and Priam agree to let a dispute be decided by a fight between Menelaus and Paris, a sacrifice is offered, and that's in Homer, the Iliad. Likewise, in Virgil's Aeneid, when Aeneas and Turnus agree to decide by single combat whether the Trojans shall remain in Rome or leave, a sacrifice seals the deal. So apparently that was a very common thing for making deals. Yeah.
All right. So after all this happens, he granted an audience to Maccabeus. He left behind Hegemonides as commander over the region from Ptolemais to the Garenes. He marched to Ptolemais. The citizens of Ptolemais were angry over the pact. Indeed, they were indignant beyond measure. They wished to nullify its terms. Lyceus came forward on the speaker's platform, defended the terms as best he could, and calmed his audience, won their support, marched back to Antioch. Such was the course of the king's expedition and return home. You know, this entire chapter has been odd. Like, the way that they make statements. Like, for example, in this second to last sentence here, it says, Lyceus came forward on the speaker's platform, defended the terms as best he could, convinced and calmed his audience, won their support, marched back to Antioch, period. It's not like, and then marched back to Antioch. And the same thing pops up earlier in the chapter, at least once, where they provide a list of things that they're doing, but they don't say like, and did that, or and then did that. It's just combined as a list. And also, it seems strange that like a lot of the narrative detail that we have in other chapters is completely skipped over and missing here, and it's a quite short chapter. That's the end of the chapter.
Yeah, and actually here's a note about some of this as well. So the sequence of events at Beth Zur in verses 19 through 22 is confused and confusing.
Agreed.
But the siege seems to end with negotiations, as in 1 Maccabees 6:49. 1 Maccabees says that Eupator took the city, while 2 Maccabees states that Eupator withdrew, attacked Judas and his men, presumably the Battle of Beth Zechariah is in mind, and was defeated. 1 Maccabees makes clear that it was Judas who was defeated. In short, 1 Maccabees 6 and 2 Maccabees 13 give quite opposite impressions of the result of the campaign. They can't just say we lost. They can't just say that. It had to be something else. It's like, no, here are some negotiations. Here's a deal that's being made.
Right.
Nah, you're a loser.
Well, it's a deal that is put forward because they lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, at least they didn't get all of their people killed, their women enslaved, and their towns burnt down like in most of the Bible.
Yeah, or even in that happened in First Maccabees. Remember?
Yeah.
Was it Simon? I think.
They focused more on the warring, yeah.
Yeah, Simon went from like city to city, burning it down and destroying.
Well, Judas burnt down a shitload of cities.
Was it
too.
Judas? Maybe I'm thinking of Judas.
Yeah. Judas, even in this book too, has been burning things down.
Yeah.
But he did it a lot in First Maccabees.
Yeah.
It's like burn down the building, let everyone inside it die.
New city, burn it down.
Yep. All right. The way that this is broken up in this translation, chapters 14 and 15 are part of the same section.
Oh, really? That's weird.
Yeah, it doesn't clearly. Well, it does, but it's just like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. I mean, that's fair. Yeah.
So let me hand that to you.
If you guys are enjoying the stream so far, make sure you drop a like, subscribe if you haven't. All that good stuff, you know. I mean, we got a lot of nifty things. We have our donation drive, our 666 donation drive. Once we hit $666, we will be getting our thetans read. We're gonna get one of those e-meters or whatever.
Yep, we're gonna see who's the most clear out of the Milwaukee Atheists team.
Yeah.
More importantly, we're gonna then tear it open and check how it works.
Yeah.
And see if we can't fudge the data.
And of course, we are still working to get everything together for the alchemy video where we try alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that'll have to wait until after.
Yeah.
The world is done.
After the world is done.
Yeah.
After the world is over.
Once we're in actual Fallout.
Yeah, then it might be easier.
It'll be easier because then we can just like raid places, right? That's what you do in Fallout.
We could raid places, but also maybe whatever we're trying to transmute will just change on its own.
Yeah.
Wow, it's magic.
Yeah, there's enough radiation in here to change this lead into gold.
Yeah, it's great. Woo. Anyways, how about we... I can't believe we found a use for that. I never thought we were ever going to use that.
I didn't either, and then I went, holy shit, I need to make sure this is the one. And then I did, and it was perfect.
Wow. So how about we hop right into chapter 14?
Yeah, let's do that. So, for some reason, this is in this section. Oh, I see. So the last date given in 2nd Maccabees was in 13:1. It says that it's the 149th year.
Yep.
The next date is the 151st year in 14:4. So the events of verses 1 through 2 are supposed to come within that span of time.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But that's a 2-year span of time. Like following all of the events that we've just gone over.
Well, it would be a 3-year span because, you wouldn't have to get to the very end and then.
Well, it depends on what time of the year we're talking about,
exactly.
right?
So either way, chapter 14. 3 years later, Judas and his men received the news that Demetrius, son of Seleucus, had sailed into the harbor of Tripolis with a strong force and a fleet, and had become master of the country, and had done away with Antiochus and his guardian, Lyceus. So, back to calling Lyceus guardian, which makes sense because he was a child that Antiochus V was.
Right, and Antiochus V was not able to have legal guardianship over himself, which really, it seems strange because he seemed to be acting in the role of the king.
Well, I mean, yeah, but let's face it, Lyceus was probably making a lot of those decisions, and then Gorgias too, right? Wasn't he part of his thing, or was that for Antiochus IV? I think maybe that was for the fourth. Whatever.
Everyone loves the one-sided conversation.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
Hey, I wasn't talking to you guys.
There was a certain Alcimus, who had previously been appointed high priest, but had voluntarily defiled himself during the time of peace. So, Alcimus, we learned from First Maccabees, did become high priest, but he's not having any kind of ceremony here for that. So,
But he did in First Maccabees,
He did,
and
yes.
they went through excruciating detail.
and this would just have to be placed, of course, in these 3 years then.
So what we're about to get, I guess, is more of an account of Alcimus.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Perceiving that there was no way for him to be secure or to have access henceforth to the holy altar, he approached King Demetrius in about the year 151 and presented him with a gold crown and palm along with some of the customary gifts from the temple. On that day, Alcimus said nothing, so he basically just bribed him. So
what verse are you at?
I just finished verse 4. I would like to hear more about the crown and the palm.
Yes, the golden crown and the palm frond. But before
Palm front, okay.
before that, in the previous verse, Alcimus is said to have defiled himself in the times of separation.
Yeah.
Scholars have puzzled over this characterization. Some have noted that since Alcimus was initially acceptable to the Hasidim, 1 Maccabees 7:12 through 18, he could not have defiled himself in the way Menelaus had done, and therefore that his defilement resulted from the incident in which 60 Hasidim were executed. Remember, 1 Maccabees 7:12 through 18.
Mm-hmm.
Some have further suggested that the time of separation mentioned here thus refers to the disagreement between the Hasidim and Judas over Alcimus. Other scholars accept that the massacre is the incident referred to by 2 Maccabees, but follow a different manuscript reading and translate in times of peace, that is, in the time following the treaty with Antiochus V. The term translated as defiled can have the general meaning of disgrace as well. So
Yeah,
that is
this would be a little bit more
something
broad.
to look out for there. But you want to know about this gold crown and these palm fronds, right? He brought, okay. At the installation of a new king, he had come for confirmation of his office, verse 4. Also, 1 Maccabees 10:60 through 64 and 11:23 through 27. And brought to the requisite gifts a gold crown, a palm, and olive branches from the temple. Olive branches may be translated by the more general gifts. The Hermenia translation, that was the end of verse 4.
Yes, it was.
Yes. Crowns were regular gifts to kings, especially at their inaugurations.
I feel like it wouldn't. Would you call that a gift to a king, or is it a different kind of crown?
It's probably a different kind of crown. They probably have like a main crown that they have. It's like hats,
Okay.
It says the gifts became obligatory as in 1 Maccabees 10:29 and Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews 12:142. In 1 Maccabees 13:37, Demetrius II thanks Simon Maccabeus for his gifts of a golden crown and a palm branch.
Nobody said they were good gifts.
Menahem Stern thought that this reference was not to a real palm branch, but to a monetary payment.
Oh.
Originally, the Greek meant a young branch, an olive branch. Polybius reports that Hannibal was met by local people who treacherously offered him olive branches and crowns/wreaths. And note that that among the barbarians, these are used as tokens of friendship. However, the Greek word came to mean gift, as is translated here with Goldstein. So it could just be gifts. It could be an olive branch, but these are things that are usually given to kings.
Okay. However, he found an opportune time for his mad designs when he was summoned by Demetrius to a meeting of the royal council and asked, "What are the present mood and aspirations of the Jews?" And of course, the mad designs are probably just like evil plots.
Tell me when you get to the end of verse 10.
Okay. He replied, "Among the Jews, those who are called Asidoi. Is there a different note for that? Because that's in verse 6, or a different translation.
6.
I'm guessing that means something we've heard already, but I'm not sure what it would be. Is it supposed to be Hasidim? I don't know.
Jews called Hasidim. Those of the Jews called Hasidim.
Okay, gotcha. Under the leadership of Judas Maccabeus, are feeding the flames of war and are in rebellion and refuse to allow your kingdom to become tranquil. As a result, I have been deprived of the distinction of my forefathers. I mean, the high priesthood. I have come here now for 2 reasons. First, because I have the king's interests truly at heart. And second, because I am seeing the welfare of my own countrymen. The folly of the persons I just mentioned has brought upon our... What? Didn't even see that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Flip.
Flip 117100. I want to see someone get worsted on the thetan meter. Oh, yeah. Lawrence will
probably
definitely
me.
be both worsted and bested.
You know what? I plan on it.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, it will
Incredible.
be fun. So thank you, Flip.
Hey, is Streamlabs still showing those things? I didn't even know.
Yeah. Why would it stop?
I don't know. I didn't notice an animation.
Oh, I didn't see one either, but it probably is.
Weird.
Maybe.
Oh, okay. Either way, let's continue.
Yep.
So they're blaming the Jews for everything.
What verse are you on now?
I am in the middle of verse 8.
Okay.
The folly of the persons I just mentioned has brought upon our entire nation no small misfortune. Please take note of all this, your majesty, and take thought for our country, and bring your provident intervention to bear upon the land and upon our sorely beset nation with the ready kindness you show to all. For as long as Judas survives, it is impossible for the commonwealth to have peace. So apparently the Jews are stirring up trouble. And it's coming from Alcimus, who was just recently placed as high priest.
Yes. Well, the language here, and I'm going to be reading a bit, so
Sure.
you can feel free to take a drink of water.
I will
or
take a
something.
drink of water. Everybody hydrate.
Yep. The language here is the same as the language in 4:6, where Onias states that Simon's unrest cannot be stopped except by the providence of the king. Here, Alcimus acts in a manner contrary to that of Onias, as Alcimus wishes to end the peace present in Judea after the events of 1323. The NIB commentary states that it parallels the charge made by Onias III against the original troublemaker Simon. In several late Jewish narratives, I wonder what that means. Late Jewish narratives are Jewish
probably
narratives from today. Late Jewish narratives.
I mean they're probably talking about Second Temple stuff,
Mhm.
Oh.
All right. In several late Jewish narratives, we find the pattern
like
where
end of Second Temple, and
Okay.
like after the destruction of the temple, maybe.
Yeah.
Did they hear that?
probably.
Good. That's water. It's hydrating.
Okay. In several late Jewish narratives, we find the pattern whereby the accusation is made that the Jews are disturbers of the realm, and this accusation is later disproved. Esther 3:13, 3rd Maccabees 3:26, 6:28, 7:4 through 7 Septuagint. I guess.
Yeah.
LXX is Septuagint.
Yes, it is.
Verse 7 has been interpreted to mean that Alcimus has had the high priesthood Say that 5 times fast.
Has had the high priesthood. Has oh,
Yeah,
no,
you
already
fucked
screwed it
up.
up.
Taken away from him. That the phrase would have this meaning where Alcimus is presenting himself as humbly seeking the best interests of his people seems out of context, since the verb aphirio can mean take off a garment, Esther 4:4, Esther 4:17k. It might suggest that Alcimus is claiming that because of his concern for his people, he has left behind his priestly duties to come to the king. See also Onias III at 4:5-6. There's also in Eerdmans here a bit that I'd like to read, perhaps in full, once you get done with verse 14.
Okay. When he had finished speaking, the rest of the friends, of course that's the king's court pretty much, the rest of the friends, who were ill-disposed towards Judas, were very quick to egg Demetrius on. He immediately appointed Nicanor, who had been commander of the Elephant Corps, and conferred upon him the title of governor of Judea, and dispatched him with orders to do away with Judas, disperse his men, and restore Alcimus as high priest of the great temple. Okay, so he was kicked out of the high priesthood?
There's a little confusion here, right? It says, no mention is made of elephants in the first attack involving a Nicanor.
Yeah, so it's a different Nicanor.
Yeah, they're hinted at in the first campaign of Lyceus and are present in the second campaign of Lyceus. In fact, the Nicanor mentioned here is to be identified with the friend of Demetrius mentioned in Polybius, ? I guess. Habicht thinks so, and Schwartz notes that Stern held the same opinion. This is also the view of John Granger. I don't know if you know who any of those people are. I don't.
No.
It goes into
definitely.
some detail about Demetrius and how it may be this guy. Habicht makes these connections, but the frequency of the name Nicanor calls for caution, as Goldstein maintains. Trying to tie all the names together in one individual requires a great deal of speculation.
So I'm going to read this next verse, and that's going to be verse 14.
Okay.
The Gentiles settled in Judea, who had fled Judas, flocked to meet Nicanor, thinking that the Jews' defeats and disasters would be their own victories. So, yeah, there should be some commentary about how they are, instead of being defeated as they were in, let's say, First Maccabees, they are taking these defeats in battle and viewing them as victories.
Mm-hmm.
I win.
Let's talk about this verse here. Made to flee. Usually.
Oh, sorry. Hold on. I actually misinterpreted that. So the fact that the Jews were losing a lot, the Gentiles were like, yes, we are winning, which by definition is, yeah.
Yeah. And it says those in Judea who had fled Judas flocked to join with Nicanor. The term usually has the sense of make to flee. Or it can mean live in banishment. So
Like exile?
I have time
Yeah,
for a
like-
campaign, but
like exile.
that's in the comments. Yeah, sure, maybe. Talk to me after the show.
Furthermore, the Nicanor involved here is unlikely to have been the same Nicanor mentioned earlier, but the author assimilates the two by giving the same epithet to both. See 8:34 and 15:3. The author of Second Maccabees makes no mention of the expedition of Bacchides and Alcimus, or of Alcimus's tenure as high priest. And also at verse 14, one should probably delete Gentiles, since the group the author intends seems to be the Israelites who opposed Judas and had been driven out of Judea. Also, I'm going to read this section from Eerdmans.
Okay.
For the events described in 2 Maccabees 14 and 15, see 1 Maccabees 7 in the commentary on that chapter. 1 and 2 Maccabees have fairly similar accounts of the struggle between Judas and Nicanor, though second Maccabees omits the reference to Bacchides' cooperation with Alcimus in first Maccabees 7:8 through 25. In first Maccabees, Nicanor begins by treacherously inviting Judas to a meeting, but Judas, suspecting treachery, declines a second meeting and defeats Nicanor in battle. First Maccabees 7:26 through 32. Nicanor visits the temple, threatening to burn it unless Judas is delivered to him. The Battle of Edessa follows. Nicanor is killed, and an annual celebration decreed. In 2 Maccabees, the battle precedes the meeting, from which mutual friendship develops until Demetrius requires Judas's arrest. Nicanor visits the temple, threatening to replace it with a temple to Dionysus unless Judas is delivered to him. And there follows, after the patriotic suicide of Rhazes and Nicanor's failed attempt to attack the Jews on the Sabbath, the final battle, the death of Nicanor, and the agreement to celebrate the day annually. These events belong to the rule of Demetrius I, who arrived from Rome in autumn 162 BC. Second Maccabees dates the event 3 years later than Eupator's invasion in the year 149, but Alcimus visits Demetrius in about the year 151. Second Maccabees dating here, as elsewhere, is vague or careless.
Yeah.
So that's all I had to read on that section so far that we've gotten into.
So there is a, of course, as we find in Goldstein's commentary a lot, for verse 15, it starts with an ellipsis.
Mm-hmm.
So
verse 15 in the Hermeneia translation says, on hearing of the invasion of Nicanor and the attack of the Gentiles.
Okay, yeah, that's actually fairly close here. By the way, it starts with an ellipsis and then says, when they heard of the arrival of Nicanor and of the Gentiles' hostile efforts, they strewed dust upon themselves and prayed to him who established his people forever, who never fails to help his portion by manifesting his power. That is not true. When
he forgets.
Yeah, what if he forgets?
He's got the shittest memory for being omnipotent.
He forgets a lot.
Tell me are you at the end of verse 15?
Yes.
Okay, so verse 15 has an interesting bit here. It says that
it probably is going to explain why there's this ellipsis.
Yeah,
at least in Goldstein's.
Well, it doesn't in here. You'll have to look at Goldstein's commentary for that.
Okay.
But it says they strewed earth on themselves and entreated. Okay. On hearing of the invasion of Nicanor and the attack of the Gentiles, they strewed on themselves and entreated the one who braces up his own people forever and always by epiphany takes part of his own portion. Well, they have a little bit of commentary here that says in the second prefixed letter, 126, let me start a little earlier, right? For his own people and his own portion. The parallelism of the people and portion is found in the prayer of Moses in Deuteronomy 9:26 and 32:9. God chose his people, Deuteronomy 28:9, 20:13, 2 Samuel 7:24, Septuagint.
Yeah.
PSS.
Yeah, there's a whole the PSS Psalms.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
That phrase.
Yeah. Sirach 37:25 holds that the days of Israel are without number. In the second prefix letter, 126, God is asked to accept the sacrifice on behalf of all the people and to guard his portion. The verb here, to take the part, is found particularly in the Psalms, Psalm 3:5, Septuagint Psalms 17:35, 39:11, 62:8, 117:13, and forever is literally as long as an aeon.
So, yeah, we're going to get a lot of callbacks to the Psalms, especially. We're going to get into some stuff about God being a shield and a fortress, that kind of stuff that we have heard plenty of times before. Mm-hmm. But there is an explanation for this ellipsis. The subject of the sentences changes abruptly to the Jews after having been in verse 14, those who flock to Nicanor. The failure to identify the Jews with a noun rather than by the vague pronoun they is probably the fault of the abridger, who left out material providing the identification. So that's why he put that in there.
All right.
Anyways, verse 16. When the commander gave the order, they immediately set out from there and met them at the village of Dessau. And I think there should be some commentary on Dessau there whenever you get a chance to find it.
Yeah, there's a little bit here. The location of Dessau at which the battle takes place is unknown, but it seems to have been within Judea.
Simon, Judas's brother, had already come to meet Nicanor and had suffered a slight setback because of the unexpected arrival of the opposition. Nevertheless, upon hearing of the manly valor continually exhibited by Judas and his men, and of their courage in their struggles for their country, Nicanor shrank from seeking a decision through bloodshed. So he's like, okay, I'll make a deal. I'll play nice.
Yeah, so he receives a slight check, but Nicanor decides to negotiate.
Yeah.
In verse 18, right? There's no mention in First Maccabees of an engagement at Dessau or of any contact between before Nicanor opens peace negotiations. In First Maccabees 7:27, the Seleucid commander from the beginning planned treachery, a motif that occurs frequently in First Maccabees, as the author is suspicious of any peace settlement with the Seleucids.
I will note that First Maccabees had a lot more treachery going
It did.
on.
Yeah.
And they rubbed it in.
Here a different picture is given. Much like the description of Antiochus V's dealings with Jerusalem, Nicanor acts honorably, and Judas acts with commendable caution, although no specific reason is given for it. It is also noteworthy how Judas consults with the people before agreeing to the treaty, which we'll see in a bit. The ambassadors that are mentioned in verse 19, I guess you haven't read yet?
Not yet.
They're otherwise unknown. The scene for the signing of the agreement is vividly drawn with the two chariots coming toward each other, two leaders sitting on facing chairs. The description of Nicanor given here, that he becomes a friend of Judas and stays in Jerusalem, completely contradicts that of First Maccabees. So there's a big difference between the First Maccabees and the Second Maccabees account, which we're in the middle of.
Yeah. Accordingly, he sent Poseidonus and Theodotus and Mattathias, a different one from the one in First Maccabees,
Definitely.
to give and receive the handclasps of peace. After the terms had been subjected to considerable scrutiny, and the commander had consulted the rank and file, and their opinion was clearly unanimous, they consented to make the treaty.
Mattathias is a Jewish name,
Yes.
and Theodotus is also well attested as a Jewish name. Both names mean given by God.
That's interesting.
So some people have argued that it's only one person who is meant, but if that were the case, one would expect the Greek to read differently.
Yeah, you'd think.
Presumably, Mattathias is a follower of Lyceus, perhaps one of those who had fled Judas.
They fixed a day on which they were to reach agreement through closed discussions. From each side came a chariot, and they set up chairs. Judas deployed ready men-at-arms at strategic points for fear of sudden treachery on the part of the enemy. Their conversation resulted in agreement. Nicanor spent time at Jerusalem and conducted himself irreproachably. He dismissed the undisciplined mobs that had thronged around him. Continually, he kept Judas in his company. He was sincerely fond of the man. He urged him to marry and beget children. He did marry. He experienced tranquility. He partook of life's blessings. So let me get this straight. So Nicanor is now like, is he supposed to be like, I mean, like they had a peace agreement, right? But is he like a mentor or something for Judas now? This is so weird.
He's just giving
a
him
total
general
flip.
life advice, right?
Yeah, I guess.
So, like, if Putin were like, Trump, you need to take a vacation.
I suppose. And then Trump takes a vacation.
Yeah.
How many did he take? I don't know.
Alcimus, however, on perceiving their mutual goodwill, took a copy of the treaty they had made and came before Demetrius, saying that Nicanor had hostile designs against the state. Indeed, he had appointed as his deputy Judas, the plotter against Demetrius' kingdom. Okay, so they're in cahoots now, or at least according to Alcimus, they're in cahoots.
Mm.
The king was infuriated and enraged by the slanders uttered by the arch-villain. He wrote to Nicanor saying that he was annoyed over the treaty and ordered him to make haste to send Maccabeus in chains to Antioch. When the news reached Nicanor, he was perplexed and troubled. Should he revoke the terms of the treaty, though the man had done no wrong? Since, however, he could not oppose the king, he sought an opportunity to carry out the order through trickery. Maccabeus noticed that Nicanor was behaving toward him with less cordiality, and that he had turned rude in their usual meetings. Believing that the lack of cordiality could have no good cause, he assembled a good many of his men and went into hiding from Nicanor. So basically the relationship turned sour.
Yeah. And Nicanor is going to threaten to replace the Jewish temple with the temple for Dionysus.
Mm-hmm.
And Dionysus's festivals was earlier imposed on the Jews.
Yeah.
See, 6, 7. That is chapter 6, verse 7.
Yes.
I'm not just counting down the number line. Right? So that's interesting. There's not a lot of commentary.
Yeah.
On
but we're going to be
these
getting
sections.
Yeah, we're going to be getting into a pretty interesting piece in just a bit.
Yeah, but Nicanor had appointed Judas as his deputy or substitute rather than successor, for only the king could nominate the governor of an arena, or of an area.
An arena.
Elder Scrolls arena.
Yep.
On realizing that he had been cleverly outsmarted by Judas, Nicanor went to the greatest and holiest of temples as the priests were offering the regular sacrifices and demanded that the man be handed over to him. When the priests declared on oath that they did not know the whereabouts of the person he was seeking, Nicanor stretched forth his right hand against the temple and swore, "If you do not hand Judas over to me, I shall raise the ground, and I shall raise to the ground this shrine of your God, and tear down the altar, and I shall build in its place a fine temple to Dionysus." Having finished speaking, he left. The priests stretched forth their hands toward the heaven and prayed to the one who has always been the champion of our people, saying, "You, Lord of all, though you are in need of nothing, chose to have a temple of your habitation in our midst. Now, Holy One, Lord of all sanctification, preserve forever from defilement this newly purified house." Newly purified. So it's kind of weird here. I'm guessing this. So if Alcimus
because
defiled
previously it had been defiled, and if you remember, they either did or did not replace all of the bricks in an attempt to purify the temple. So this is still relatively newly purified within the last few years, right?
Yeah, I suppose. So this next part, this is on another martyr. I think this is the part on him.
This is about Razis.
Yes.
So let's talk about Razis a little bit. Razis is not known as a Jewish name. Goldstein suggests its origin in a Hebrew phrase in Isaiah 24:16. That's
all right.
That's a little bit about Razis. There is also
Yeah, it's just another one of those additions, I believe, or maybe that's a later story. I forget.
Yeah. What verses are you
37.
starting? Okay, so the episode of Razis' martyrdom interrupts the focus on Nicanor and Judas,
There we go.
just as the martyrdom accounts in 617 through 742 were placed after the desecration of the temple and brought about God's mercy. So also the author places Razis' death after Nicanor's threat against the temple. After Razis' willing death comes the removal of the threat.
Okay. Razis, one of the elders of Jerusalem, was a patriot of excellent reputation.
So he may have been one of the elders consulted by Judas earlier in chapter 13.
May have been.
May have been.
One who was called Father of the Jews because of his love for his people, yet he was denounced to Nicanor. Father of the Jews is an interesting epithet to use.
Yes, the title Father of the Jews is unexpected, but it may be a position similar to Benefactor of the City held by Onias III.
Maybe. Indeed, in the preceding time of war, he had been brought to trial on a charge of practicing Judaism. And with the greatest zeal, he had exposed himself, body and soul, to danger for the sake of Judaism. So, yep, another martyr story here. Inasmuch as Nicanor wished to make a public demonstration of the hostility he felt toward the Jews, he sent more than 500 soldiers to arrest him. That seems like way too many people.
I just noticed it seemed like there were way too many elephants in the background.
There are quite a lot of elephants.
More than 21.
Yeah. What verse was that?
That was verse 39.
Okay. Tell me when you get to the end of 42.
Okay. He believed that by arresting him and showing him disrespect, he would deal a severe blow to the Jews. So he wanted to break down their morale.
Mm-hmm.
The troops were about to capture the tower and were trying to force the outer door and were calling for fire to burn the doors. Since he was trapped, Razis fell upon his own sword, nobly preferring to die rather than fall into the hands of men accursed and suffer violence which did not befit his nobility. So this is an interesting contrast that we can draw, because in a lot of cultures, like, dying in battle is the more noble thing.
Right, like if you want to get into Valhalla.
Yeah. But from this, it seems like it's more noble to kill yourself than it is to die in battle. But I guess he's also worried about the potential humiliation that he could suffer.
That was 42?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Mediterranean code of honor and disgrace is strongly at play here. Plato, in the 9th book of his Laws, states that suicide is allowable under judicial constraint, under the constraint of unavoidable misfortune, and to avoid participating in a dishonorable deed.
Unavoidable misfortune.
Yeah.
That guy with the meat.
But
and he refused to eat that meat, remember? In Psalms, it might have been? Or
No. There was,
it was in...
that was Eliezer.
Yeah,
that was
Eliezer.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it's the same theme, yeah.
Yeah, but we can
according to
also... the 7 brothers and their mother.
That too, yeah.
Right? And, I mean, you can look at historical examples like the Masada Jews who committed suicide on top of the mountain instead of letting the Romans take them, right? That was a thing. So, yeah, I'd say this is, like, maybe not the most common practice, but, like, pretty common.
Sure. It's just interesting, the contrast.
Yeah, definitely. And they're deliberately trying to draw out a contrast here between Alcimus and this new guy, Razis.
Yeah.
Right? Because Alcimus, he willingly defiles himself, and Razis, like, dies for the purpose of not defiling himself, right?
However, in his haste and anxiety, he aimed his blow badly. okay, so he failed. He did not do well there. And as the troops poured through the entrances, he ran bravely up upon the wall and courageously hurled himself down upon the troops. Okay, so he pulled like a so he pulled like one of those. Okay, so you remember Jezebel, and she just they pushed her off of the like out of the window, right?
Yeah.
But he is doing that on purpose to land on the troops.
Finish this chapter or this part.
Yeah,
these next few verses.
Okay, that would be the end of the chapter.
Yeah. There's a bit here.
They quickly drew back and left a gap so that he came down in the midst of the vacant space. He was still breathing, and in the ardor of his passion, he stood up, though his blood was gushing and his wounds were excruciating. Nevertheless, he dashed through the troops and stood upon a precipitous rock. He was already almost completely drained of blood when he pulled out his intestines, and grasping them in both hands, he flung them at the troops and prayed to him who is master of life and of the spirit to restore them to him. Such was the manner of his death.
Yeah.
What?
I'm sorry, and that's like not defiling things? You just threw your intestines at somebody
No, that doesn't
and killed
count.
yourself.
It's noble or whatever.
So, just as the description of Antiochus IV's death has the king suffer and die from 3 injuries and illnesses, so here Lyceus makes 3 attempts to die and finally succeeds. The author draws out the death scene for the fullest emotional effect, even if Lyceus' inability to give himself a proper sword stroke suggests that he is not too experienced a warrior and is a bit flustered. Lyceus' final actions, standing on a steep rock and throwing his entrails, are made for theater. It is interesting how the events of verses 45 through 46 are placed in one sentence.
Yeah.
So he tried to, stab himself, tried to commit seppuku.
Yeah.
But that didn't work because he missed something vital, I guess. So he's just in a lot of pain. And then he jumped out the window. And the thing is, they all stepped out of the way like in a cartoon. And he lands on the ground in pain, and then he's like still not dead. So he gets up, goes over to a rock, bleeding, and just starts ripping out his intestines, tossing them, and praying. Oh,
I was like, didn't they do that in School of Rock where Jack Black goes to crowd surf and
yeah,
like
yeah,
face plants?
Yep,
Yeah.
It's exactly like that.
Woo! If you're enjoying the stream so far,
If you enjoyed hearing about the
gruesome death of this martyr.
Yeah, of Razis. Drop a like, subscribe if you haven't, share around the stream. Let's see if we get something
Enjoy
else.
the intensity.
Yeah, please enjoy the intensity of our of our streams, because we know that they can get very intense. Biblical stuff is very
Yeah, man, we got like guys committing seppuku and dropping into fields and then throwing all their intestines all over people. We have guys getting thrown into silos of ashes where they get sucked in and drowned to death.
brilliant.
Yeah, this is a pretty hardcore day.
Yeah, last time was more intrigue, and this time is more intrigue in terms of like, Lady of the Night stuff.
Oh yeah,
all the bad things that happen to you if you go to them. That was cool. I loved part 5. Oh, that was last week Sunday.
that was
That was
Proverbs.
Sunday school.
What was last week Maccabees? I forgot already.
Maccabees, we read letters.
Letters.
Talked
oh,
about
that's
battles.
right. That's right. It wasn't as cool. This is good reading for last Sunday and this Friday.
Yeah.
Very good.
I mean, second Maccabees is definitely ending on a high note.
Yeah, definitely.
So, chapter 15. Nicanor, on learning that Judas and his men were in the region of Samaria, plotted to take advantage of the day of rest to attack them when he could do so in perfect safety.
Yeah, so the Jewish observance of the Sabbath was well known to non-Jews and was portrayed as a superstition that allowed them to be taken unawares. Makes sense. They've tried that before.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a standard kind of action, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that to this day, to use a biblical turn of phrase,
Incredible.
there are still attacks on the Jews on the Sabbath when they do get attacked.
Probably.
Anyway, however, the Jews who were being forced to accompany him said, "Do not perpetrate so savage and barbarous a massacre, but give due respect to the day which has been preeminently honored with sanctification by him who sees all." "The heinous sinner asked in reply, is he who gave the command to keep the Sabbath day master in heaven?" Thank you. Master in heaven. When they answered, "It is the living Lord himself, the master of heaven, who has given the order to observe the seventh day," Nicanor said, "I too, who give the command to take up arms and carry out the king's orders, am master on earth." Even so, he did not succeed in carrying out his cruel intention. So there's your parallelism between God and Nicanor. Though many Christians say today that Satan is the master of earth.
Yeah, you do hear that.
Yeah.
But like ultimately, God's the master of everything, so.
Right. But you know, I always found the kind of Calvinist perspective very strange, right? Because they take this like very hardcore original sin and determinism point of view.
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
honestly, it makes more sense. The deterministic point of view.
Yeah, it definitely is actually more in line with how a God would actually work if one existed.
Yeah.
Right. But like, when you have people declaring that they're masters on earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even Satan doing that, the Calvinist can't really say that's a bad thing, right? Because they're determined to act in that way. Everything's in accordance with God's will, including here Nicanor's decision to carry out his attack on the Sabbath. It just so happens that he was unsuccessful. It doesn't say why he was unsuccessful. One would imagine that he would be very successful attacking a bunch of people who, according to their religion, aren't allowed to like do anything. So,
well, it's because God's on their side.
Well, I guess. Anyway, and I wonder how Eric would view that, right? Because Eric's a Calvinist.
He is, yeah. That's so Eric. For those of you who don't really watch that often, there is this Christian dude on the college campus over here at UW Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Sure, not now, but
yeah, not right now. But he hands out free pens, usually with some Jesus stuff attached to it.
Yeah.
They're good pens too.
Yeah, well, he gets the pens in mass stock, right?
Yeah.
And he always makes sure to give you at least two.
Yeah.
Because, one of them might be bunk.
Yeah.
So, but he's a nice guy. He's a Calvinist.
Yeah.
And as a Calvinist, I wonder, because this is not in the Jewish canon. It's a very pro-Jewish story.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's not in the Jewish canon. It's only in some Christian canons, right?
Yeah. Catholic.
So one would think...
Protestant, too.
No.
Are you sure?
No, not Protestant.
Not Protestant.
The Orthodox Church has 3rd and 4th Maccabees, too, I think.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. But, it's only the Christians who... not even all the Christians, but it's only the Christians who really would have extensive exposure to 1st and 2nd Maccabees.
Yeah, because the thing is, when it comes down to canon, I actually get into this quite a bit in the video that I am currently working on, the canonization of 1st Enoch in the Ethiopian church. Mm-hmm. So basically the division comes down to what people viewed as divinely inspired and what they didn't, as to what is canonical. So they could still view these as very important historical works, but not as divine. Yeah.
I don't know why I got on this Calvinist kick.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I love them.
But, also with the Calvinists, how could you deny that any work is divinely inspired if everything is deterministic? Right? Because then everything is in accordance with God's plan, including the writing of every single book that's ever existed.
That's a good point. But there's a division there.
Yeah. I guess some...
Because actually one you could call divinely inspired and the other one is divinely...
necessary?
Yeah. Theology, everybody. Let's continue.
Theology. Nicanor, with the utmost boastfulness and arrogance, resolved to take up all the arms of Judas and his men and set them up as a monument of his putting them to rout. So it's like the Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maccabees, however, never ceased to be confident, having every hope that he would get help from the Lord. He exhorted his men not to be intimidated by the onset of the Gentiles, but to keep in mind the succor they had received before from heaven. And so, to look forward now, too, to the victory the Almighty would give them. By encouraging them with quotations from the Torah and the prophets, and by reminding them also of the struggles they had come through, he whetted their zeal. He roused their anger and urged them on as he held before them at the same time the broken faith of the Gentiles and their violation of their oaths. He armed each of his men not so much with the security afforded by shields and spears as with the encouragement derived from the good words. So he held like a pep rally.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Like that scene in
Braveheart?
Yes. That's the exact scene I was thinking of.
That worked out really well for him, too.
So that's quite impressive.
Yep.
It's rousing speech.
Yeah, and, elsewhere we might even get a snippet of that rousing speech, but it seems like at the end here, a lot of the events are getting compressed more.
Yeah.
They're trying to wrap it up,
Yeah.
but they don't even have a summary chapter like they usually do, so this is sort of the summary chapter.
Maybe the epitomist was running out of paper.
Maybe.
Running out of scrolls.
That stuff's not cheap.
Getting close to the end of a scroll, and you're like,
Yeah, like,
oh man,
shit, I gotta get this.
What do I do? Yeah.
Look, I already told them I wouldn't tell them the dates and stuff because, for abridging, so I got to abridge harder now.
But it makes a good point. Propaganda is an effective way to get people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do if they were thinking rationally.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. Furthermore, by telling them of a trustworthy dream, he roused their spirits beyond measure. His vision was as follows.
Yeah, so
like Joseph, right?
Yep. So Joseph is, the dream interpreter.
Right, but he also had dreams of the future, right?
Yeah, but this kind of that's where in antiquity how a lot of people thought that the gods interacted with humans through dreams.
Well, they didn't have any other explanation for it. We barely have an explanation for it now.
Where did mine go?
Like, we got the basic explanation is that the eyes are moving in a weird way at a certain time of night. And some people say that the explanation is that it's your brain's way of preventing you from going insane.
I thought it was like your brain's way of taking everything that happened since the last time you slept and processing it or some shit.
Right. There's some people who take that kind of approach. Also there was Freud, right, who thought that most of the events that happen in dreams are actually wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
Right?
Is that why I don't have them?
I don't know. Maybe you just have terrible dream recall and you have them all the time and you just don't realize.
That's what I'm thinking.
More recently, but most of my dreams have been like me remembering that I had thought all night. Woohoo. It's not really a dream.
Okay, incredible story.
Yep, sounds like you're broken. But yeah, the idea of divine guidance from dreams, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a thing. And even to a certain extent, it's part of certain spiritualities today, right? Like the Tibetans have a dream yoga, and their dream yoga basically involves learning how to become a lucid dreamer so that you can meditate while you're sleeping.
That's too easy.
They just want to be meditating 24 hours a day, right? But I mean, I guess they couldn't really come to a different conclusion about where dreams come from. It's not like they were able to. I mean, they might see someone's eyes moving around a little bit, but they're not like doing in-depth studies of REM sleep cycles.
Yeah, definitely not.
Right. And we definitely
I have great night sleeps. I don't know what she's talking about.
Only vaguely have an understanding of what the hell is going on when people are dreaming.
Well, we're always getting a little bit closer, probably.
Yeah, a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
His vision was as follows. He saw Onias, the late high priest, a good man and true, of modest bearing and mild manner, whose utterances were always fitting, who from childhood had practiced every aspect of virtue. Onias stretched forth his hands to pray for the entire company of the Jews. Thereafter, in the same posture, there appeared a man remarkable for his white hair and his dignity. He had a certain majesty about him, marvelous and magnificent. On being asked, Onias replied, this lover of his brethren, who offers many prayers for our people and for the holy city, is Jeremiah, the prophet of God. Jeremiah stretched forth his hand to give Judas a golden sword, and as he gave it to him, he addressed him as follows. Take the holy sword as a gift from God, and with it shatter our enemies.
Yeah, break down
intense.
your
Thanks.
opponents. The same language is used of God in Exodus 15:6-7. Your right hand, O Lord, broke down the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you overthrew your opponents. Antiochus IV had been also broken down by God. So yes, Jeremiah pops up, of course, the very famous prophet.
If you remember, the sword is also mentioned at Enoch 90:19 and 34. Verses written only shortly after the battle with Nicanor. Enoch 90:34 strongly suggests that a real sword was said to be the one handed to Judas in his vision. We cannot tell whether our writer believed the sword to be real, but there is no reason to think that he believed that Judas, having received it, whether real or symbolic, would henceforth be invincible, as suggested by Habich in this thing that he wrote. To judge by Enoch 90:34, Judas gave up the sword to the temple after his victory over Nicanor. The sword is a victory handed by a god to his chosen commander or king is an Egyptian motif used by the Ptolemies.
So there's actually a little bit more on that. I think Herminia's commentary is way better on this.
Okay.
So the motif of a special weapon being given to a hero is well known in traditional literature. In the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, Marduk is given an irresistible weapon to fight Tiamat.
He gets a net. He throws a net on Tiamat, and then he basically cuts her up.
Ah, okay.
Right.
It was a good net, though.
In the Iliad, Achilles is given arms fashioned by the god Hephaestus to fight Hector. In Egyptian accounts, a god is often gives a sword to Pharaoh to defeat his enemy. The Lord is said to have a sword, most famously in Ezekiel, Zechariah, and Isaiah. Note also that in Isaiah 31:8, Assyria is predicted to fall by the sword, not of a human being. In the allegorical vision of the history of the world in 1 Enoch 90, at the end of history, a sword is given to the sheep to destroy the beasts who had attacked them. After their victory, the sheep bring the sword back to the temple. So, yeah, it's a lot of very...
Hey, has anyone ever watched a movie with the main character or an anime that had the hero's journey? Whoa, they got that MacGuffin sword at some point. My gosh, there it is.
Good old hero's journey.
Yeah,
it would be...
that.
So he's obviously calling on motifs of the time, right? To say that, he inspired them by telling them about this revelation that he got through his dreams, where these images that are common to these stories popped up in his dreams, right? But, for one thing, Judas could just be lying to the people about having a vision and using an explanation of these motifs in order to further rouse their spirits, right?
Right.
But for another thing, like, doesn't it just seem a little coincidental? Like, through First and and Second Maccabees, there are so many prophetic things that are associated with Judas.
Definitely.
Like, it just seems like a bit much.
The thing is, it's not even prophetic, because the thing is, that's how you built a hero that's how you built heroes in Jewish literature. You basically relate them to the prophets of old, the prophets and the patriarchs.
Right, but it's
and the kings and the judges.
Yeah.
It's not like in focused sections often, right? Like in the Torah, we have like a focus section, which is the binding of Isaac, right? And these like little revelations or bits of prophecy that Judas fulfills or that Simon fulfills, they're just like thrown in there.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily prophecy fulfillment. It's just like it's like things are being said on reenactment.
Kind of sometimes one-upmanship.
Yeah.
I remember who was it that parted two rivers or something.
There was,
and they were mimicking Moses. It was such a similar scene to the parting of the Red Seas. I remember it.
No, so there was a let's use Jesus as an example. So you know how in, I forget which book of Kings, but I think it's Elisha that distributes the bread and has his bread miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's him.
I think so.
Yeah. But then Jesus feeds a lot more people with a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that one-upmanship.
Right, there's one-upmanship, but also the like prophecies fulfilled or like the miracles performed aren't consistent between the accounts, right? And you would figure.
Well, the thing is, this isn't really about prophecy fulfillment.
Goldstein argues for a common source, right?
Yeah.
And I guess one of the arguments I would say against a common source
would be the differences.
Would be the massive differences in like the theological implications of this character, right?
Yeah.
But you would think that these motifs, like the golden sword or the golden armor, right, would be something that pops up consistently between the different accounts, right? Because they're very fanciful images. They're more fanciful than Judas burning down a building with people in it.
It seems like the golden sword thing is for like the final stretch, or
which is
it's for the final countdown,
right? And we are like in the final stretch.
Yeah,
here.
pretty much.
So, anyways. The altogether eloquent words of Judas had the power to stimulate the hearer to virtue and to fill the minds of the young with manly valor. None of that feminine valor bullshit. Encouraged by them, his men resolved not merely to march, but bravely to charge, and with all manly valor close with the enemy, and decide the issue, because the city and the sanctuary were at stake. Indeed, their fear for wives and children and for brother and kinsmen were of less concern to them. Their greatest and foremost fear was for the hallowed temple. Deep, too, was the anguish which perturbed those who shut up in the city over the battle in the open country. All now were awaiting the impending trial of strength. The enemy were about to engage. Their army was drawn up for battle. The beasts were posted in an advantageous position, and the cavalry was positioned on the flanks.
Yeah, so this is probably what's depicted here. The beasts mentioned here are elephants.
Yeah.
No way.
But yet the presence of elephants is problematic, as the Seleucid elephants had been slaughtered by the Roman legate Octavius prior to the arrival of Demetrius.
And that's according to those. Individually, they're not domesticated.
That's according to Polybius and Appian also.
It's a real effort to tame an elephant. I mean, they live a while, and you got to do it from near birth, and it doesn't always work, and you might just train them how to kill people, and then they go free.
Perhaps the presence of the elephants was deduced from Nicanor's being the former commander of a squadron of elephants. There are no elephants. There are no elephants in the battle description in 1 Maccabees 7:39 through 43.
All right. On seeing the approach of the enemy masses, their military equipment in all its variety, and the ferocity of their beasts, Judas raised his hands toward heaven and called upon the Lord who does wonders.
As he does a lot.
Yep. Knowing that not by strength and arms, but according to his judgment, does he grant victory to the worthy. You would think that the Jews would never lose a battle.
Yeah, you think.
Determinism, they had to get better, blah, 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 whatever, I don't know.
In his prayer, he spoke as follows. You, Master, sent your angel in the time of Hezekiah, king of Judah, and he destroyed no fewer than 185,000 from the camp of Sennacherib.
Okay.
Okay. Now, too, Lord of the heavens, send a good angel before us to inspire fear and trembling. Let those who have come blaspheming against your holy people be terrified by the might of your arm. With these words, he ended his prayer. Meanwhile, Nicanor and his men advanced to the sound of trumpets and pagan war hymns. That's a good t-shirt, pagan war hymns.
We could always write a pagan war hymn. Or we'll do our best.
Yeah. Judas and his men, uttering invocations and prayers, joined battle with the enemy. As they fought with their hands, all the while praying to God in their hearts, they laid low no fewer than 35,000, rejoicing greatly in God's manifestation of his power. Having brought the battle to an end, they were joyfully leaving the field when they recognized the fallen body of Nicanor in full armor.
Oh, no.
There was shouting and tumult. And then they began to praise the Lord in the language of their forefathers. The man who in every way had played the chief role, body and soul, in the struggle of his fellow Jews, the man who had throughout maintained his youthful love for members of his people, ordered that Nicanor's head and his arm up to his shoulder be cut off and brought to Jerusalem.
So good old dismemberment.
Yeah.
So decapitation and cutting off the right hand, the sword hand, was a custom found among the Persians, but dismemberment is also found among the Greeks and the Romans. And then, of course, if we go back to Jewish writings, you have Goliath, right? David cut off his head. Then we have the Philistines cutting off Saul's head and then hanging up his corpse. So that's a thing.
Yeah.
Tell me when you get to the end of verse 35.
I will tell you, even though that's one verse away from the end. So
Okay.
why don't I just tell you when I get to the end?
Oh, all right, fair enough.
All right. So they are like prayers against pagan war hymns, battles end. They cut off Nicanor's head and his arm.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately now they're never going to be able to identify the rest of his body. So even if they want, they can't bury him within the place of his fathers, right? It's impossible. They're not going to find this body. On his arrival there, he called together the members of his nation and had the priests stand before the altar. Then he summoned the men from the Acra, and he showed them the head of the abominable Nicanor in the hand of the blasphemer, which he had boastfully stretched forth against the sacred house of the Almighty. Cutting out the tongue of the impious Nicanor, he said that he would feed it to the birds bit by bit, and he ordered that the arm be hung opposite the temple as retribution for Nicanor's mad audacity. All offered praises toward heaven to the Lord, who had manifested himself, saying, "Blessed is he who had preserved his place from defilement." He had the severed head of Nicanor hung from the Acra as clear and evident token for all of the Lord's succor. By a unanimous vote of the people, they decreed that they would by no means let that day pass unmarked, but they would keep as a special day the 13th of the 12th month, called Adar in Aramaic, the day before the day of Mordecai. And besides the 3-verse epilogue.
Yeah, I'm going to comment on this, and then we can do the epilogue there.
It's the end of the narrative.
Yeah. So for historical information, all this is effective literarily, but probably incorrect historically, since the citadel remained under the control of the enemies of the Hasmoneans, 1 Maccabees 9:53 and 10:9. Although Jonathan tried to gain control of it, he could not, and it was not until 141 BCE that Simon conquered it. According to the author of 1 Maccabees, the Jews displayed Nicanor's head and right hand just outside Jerusalem. It seems unlikely that the corpse of an unclean Gentile could be brought into the view of the priests around the altar. If a Gentile was not to enter the temple and the skins of unclean animals were forbidden in Jerusalem, how much more so would a dead Gentile render the temple unclean? Mm-hmm. So that's the note there. But basically, people generally trust First Maccabees more than they do Second Maccabees as to which one is more historically reliable.
Yeah.
The other guy synopses it and says he will not include important information. I'm going to go with the guy that says he is excluding stuff is less accurate.
Well, I mean, Second Maccabees is also like a lot more fantastical. Like they describe battles with huge amounts of elephants and chariots, and they have angels that come down and blind people, and like swords that people get through their dreams. Yeah, and it's wild.
Far more fantastical.
So on the last verse there, verse 36, the wording of verse 36 is exceedingly similar to that of 10:8, suggesting how the book was structured. The Jewish calendar begins at Nisan, March or April, and the last month, Adar, falls in February or March.
The writer is aware that the name Adar is not originally Hebrew. In fact, it was taken into Hebrew and Aramaic from Babylonian.
Sounds that way.
It is interesting that the author of 2 Maccabees helps to identify the feast day by reference to Mordecai's day, known from the book of Esther. The feast of Mordecai is thus acknowledged as well established for the author of 2 Maccabees. Since the author of 2 Maccabees shows knowledge of otherwise unknown events in Babylonia, 820, he may also have known about this popular celebration.
Yes, today's readings were badass, I have to agree.
It says, why does our writer call 14th of Adar the day of Mordecai instead of Purim? An Aramaic equivalent for Purim is used by Jews writing in Greek. Other Jewish sources name days of great Jewish victories after the vanquished enemy, not after the victorious leader, e.g. the day of Midian. And even the day mentioned here, which is called the day of Nicanor in Megalatanit. Indeed, our writer uses a purely Greek expression, which rendered literally would be the Mordecaic day.
Yeah, if you remember when we were talking about the naming of Purim, I think it was in our last episode of Esther, we did discuss where that term came from.
That whole chunk there was about the origin of it.
Yeah, right. So you can basically go back and reference that to figure out the origin of that.
Though what Goldstein says here is that in all probability, our writer chooses his words to stress the parallelism between Judas and Mordecai. By Mordecai's command, the Jews annihilated 75,510 of their enemies on the 13th of Adar and celebrated it on the 14th of Adar. And the annual observance of the 14th of Adar was voted by the Jews on the proposal of Mordecai. Just so, under Judas's command, the Jews destroyed 35,000 enemies, and the people decreed that the day of rejoicing should be observed annually. Neither in 1 Maccabees nor here are we told whether the 13th of Adar was the day of the battle or the day of the celebration.
Well, here's a little bit more about the date. So the date is 17th of March, 161 BC, or perhaps 160 BC, though Second Maccabees does not state the year. Adar was the 12th month and the final month of the year, which began with Nisan in spring. Second Maccabees associates the day with Mordecai's Day, otherwise the Feast of Purim. According to Esther, on 13 Adar, the Jews were allowed to gather in their cities to lay hands on the persecutors. The following 14 and 15 Adar were to be days of feasting and gladness. Second Maccabees thus makes Nicanor's Day the climax of the book. Similarly celebrate the death of a persecutor. The author, not quite accurately, states that from Nicanor's death the city was in Jewish hands. But see 1 Maccabees 13, 41 to 42.
All right, well, let's read this epilogue. Such was the outcome of the affair of Nicanor. From that time on, the city has been held by the Hebrews. Therefore, I myself shall bring my account to a stop at this very point. If it is well and cleverly written, that is what I wish. If it is undistinguished and mediocre, that was all I could achieve. It is just as disagreeable to drink pure wine as it is to drink pure water. There's a note on here. Wines in the ancient Greek world were indeed so strong that they were usually drunk mixed with water. I once had an argument with a Christian about this, and they were like, "Well, no, when they drank wine in their religious rituals, they would water it down so it wouldn't be that strong." And I'm like, "Well, their wine started off stronger, and they had to water them down so they weren't incredibly strong."
One of the things that I heard is that ancient Greek and Roman wines kept the peat in there until it was drunk. They didn't fully purify it. And so that's why people would shake their wine glasses around like that, so that it could aromate the remaining amount of that before it was mixed with water. And it started at maybe 22% alcohol, which is a lot more than our wines are today.
Yeah, usually our wines are somewhere between 10 and 15% alcohol. Yeah. Some are 17. I've seen 17. I haven't seen a 20% wine in a while.
So you wouldn't find them on shelves.
Yeah.
So,
but we're not completely done here. Let me just finish this.
I want to talk about wine.
Okay.
Wines, of course, as you noted, wines were so potent in the ancient world that they were normally mixed with water. Schwartz notes that those who did not do so were, quote, Scythian. The Septuagint rendition of Jeremiah 25:15 makes the cup of wrath into a cup of unmixed wine, and the cup of foaming wine, well mixed, prepared for sinners in Psalm 75:8, becomes in the Septuagint, Psalm 74:8, a cup full of unmixed wine. In the Psalms of Solomon 8:14, God is said to have mingled for the sinners of Jerusalem a spirit of wandering, to have given them a cup of unmixed wine, that they might become drunk. Schwartz also observes that later rabbinic passages hold that, quote, only wine that has been mixed with water deserves to be blessed as wine. There you go, yeah. And, quote, if one drinks unmixed wine at the Passover meal, he has fulfilled his obligation, but not in the respectable way of a free man.
Okay. Well, let's finish this off.
Yeah.
In the same manner that wine, once mixed with water, produces a delightful savor, so the apt mixture of styles delights the ears and of the readers of a history. This shall be my final word.
Yeah, so
and that is the end of Second Maccabees.
Yes, it is. That is the end of Second Maccabees. You know what? This was a lot more entertaining.
Yes, definitely.
Than First Maccabees.
Way more entertaining than First Maccabees.
So I guess even though the author was mediocre as a historian, he was better as a literary, element keeper. I don't know. He kept pacing better in some ways. he skimped out on the more boring details, and he said some of the scarier stuff that like disemboweling and all the fun things we had
and
today.
He's a little self-aware at the end there. He's like, well, if it sucks, I did the best that I could.
Yeah, pretty much.
Very self.
So yeah, because we have to distinguish between the author Jason and the epitomist, right?
Right. But we don't. I mean, what's relevant to us is the epitomist.
Yeah,
right?
pretty much.
Can't
That's
access the
what
other
we
one.
have. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if I don't think we can even like posit anything about Jason.
Very little,
right?
yeah.
Because the epitomist account is what we have, and anything that we have from Jason through the epitomist is already biased through the epitomist.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't remove his lens.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, yeah, you have to, look very hard to try to get past bias in books anyways, but it's even harder if you're doing a secondary.
I suppose it's fortunate that we have all these other Maccabees to compare it to.
I'm gonna give Second Maccabees 4 stars.
4 stars. That is, you know what? I think that's fair. Yeah, 4 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4 stars. Not perfect. There's some pacing issues.
You're not going to do a review of this, obviously.
And no.
Well, maybe someday we'll do the Apocrypha. Right?
Or the Maccabees,
The
if you
Maccabees,
get
yeah.
all of them
Right.
done.
But then we might have to. Okay, so in the Ethiopian canon, they have books that are called Maccabees, but they're not the same books as our Maccabees. Yeah, exactly. It's very annoying. So there is that.
Yeah. But next time on Milwaukee Atheists Present Friday Apocryphal Podcast, that we'll be covering something else because this is the end.
Yeah,
of Second
that's the
Maccabees.
end of Second Maccabees. So we were originally planning on covering Jubilees since we have the commentaries for that.
Mhm.
Jubilees is not in here, but what is in here is Sirach, the book of Sirach, the wisdom of Ben Sirach, whatever.
Mhm.
The alphabet.
The book of Jesus Ben Sirach,
Yeah, that
Ecclesiasticus,
yeah,
all the same thing.
exactly. So it does get a little
Ridiculous.
yeah, with all the different separate names that can be used for Sirach, but we're going to be doing that one instead because so the Jubilees translation, you know how we had an Enoch translation, the
Yeah.
Hermenia translation of
Yeah.
First Enoch?
And the Hermenia translation of Jubilees is coming out in September.
Yes, September 1st. That's when the Hermenia translation is coming out. So we're going to wait for it. And until then, we will be reading Sirach. And it's a very influential book.
Mm-hmm.
Very important wisdom text.
Very.
Yeah. So
Arguably almost as influential as Proverbs.
Proverbs has been hilarious.
Yeah, I've
There's
been loving
at
Proverbs.
least the last episode of Proverbs was hilarious. But either way, what do we have going on? We still have our drive, right? Our 6 to 6 drive.
Yeah, we are also accepting Amazon wishlist
Yes.
stuff.
The link.
Thanks to the 5 people who got more books.
By the way,
Yeah, definitely.
what books were gotten?
Yeah, they haven't arrived yet. So
But what are they?
there is a commentary on 2 Samuel.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book on angels and one on demons. For you, and then there's another one that I forget what it is.
Saint stuff?
It-
Or are we done with that?
I don't think it's
Well,
saints
we'll
stuff.
go over it once we're off the air.
But either way, some stuff is in the works. So we have some stuff coming up. I'm still working on the canonization of First Enoch.
Yep.
And I think you have some of the script done.
Yeah, I have some of the script done for the occult Nazism video.
Yeah.
But I'm also currently like working on shit that outside of the channel, right?
Yeah.
So
That's all I'm doing other than 3D printing things.
Yeah, that's true. Chris now is a 3D printer, so he's been doing that. Let's see what else we got going on. We got Teespring.
Yep, we got Teespring. We also have a Patreon. You know, you can be on this show if you donate enough money per month.
Yeah, and you just for $1 a month, you get access to all of our video scripts.
Yep, and for just $10 a month, you get entered into a weekly or monthly
T-shirt
giveaway.
Yes.
Yeah, not quite weekly. Okay, we can't afford that.
Yeah, we cannot. But yeah, monthly T-shirt giveaways. Patron hangouts. All that stuff is on there.
Thinking of giving some keychains away in a giveaway. We'll talk about that next month.
Yeah.
I got to actually find somebody who can make templates or figure out how to do it myself. But very reasonably and easily, I can mass produce.
Yeah.
And thus, we can have a giveaway for people of a certain tier.
Yeah.
That might be interesting. Instead of having a wheel for one of our things, still we can keep the wheel.
Yeah.
You can get one of these bottle openers / keychains.
Pretty much whatever we think of.
Yeah, whatever we think of, or more balls.
Yeah.
Balls.
Yeah.
Right. But
See, but if you don't want to get T-shirts through a giveaway, you could just go on Teespring.
Yeah.
What else do we have? Amazon wishlist link is in the description.
The problem with the occult Nazism thing is that it's a really broad
it is
category.
Yeah.
Right. So researching it is kind of difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna get bits and pieces from here and there, but I mean, losing all of my data.
Yeah.
Like 88%.
Yeah, I lost like most of what I had when my computer crashed.
Yeah.
And it sucks.
Yeah, I bet, because that's a lot of stuff.
Man, we could use another computer to save all that stuff on. A whole nother one, just more of them.
Yeah, I even disassembled my external hard drive and like fucked around and threw like the drives from the broken laptop in there. And no, just completely erased all of the data.
Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah, it sucked.
Yeah. Either way, though, since we're starting a new book shortly, we have to switch out some of the books on this table.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did order actually from the Anchor Bible series, the Sirach. So that's coming in.
Excellent. And, I've got a shitload of Qurans.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Watch out, everyone. The Muslim show is coming eventually.
Yeah.
What's it
eventually.
called?
It's going to be called Public Islamic Studies Saturdays.
Yes.
Yeah, you can do the acronym yourself. So, with that being said, I think we're done.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Drop a like if you haven't already, because it actually really helps us. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff that you see right here. And we also have Facebook and Twitter. Yes. Thank you, Nightbot, for reminding me. Facebook and Twitter, it's free to follow us there. All links in the description, or Nightbot, whatever you prefer. And I suppose we will
see you Sunday.